Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is like my timeline. Not necessarily as it relates to social media, but the timeline as far as uh, a 10-year stretch. And the reason why I wanted to come to this was because um, I think like most of us, I can't even say most of us, some of us, um, have certain things happen in their lives and you're so used to going that you never really stop to uh, take an assessment as to what you did or didn't do, um, any levels of growth, any levels of stagnation. Uh, and you never really take the time to kind of stop and smell the roses and see, okay, well, hey, I did do something during this particular period of time. Um, and so the other day I'm riding around, I'm not even really paying attention. And I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember who I was listening to, and they referenced something about a 10-year stretch or whatever, what they did. And then I thought back, to my own personal things that I'd gone through. And I was like, the 90s, I speak very highly of the 90s because a lot happened in the 90s. But then when I look a little deeper, a lot happened to me in the 90s. And so that's how I came to this topic. Just scanning what I did in a 10-year period. And the thing that I realized was, and I think I already knew this, but like you don't really think about it, but like I hit some major milestones in a very relatively short span of time. Because 10 years, it looks and feels and sounds like it's a long time, but relatively speaking, it's not. I mean, it's a decade, but you'd be surprised when you think about how quickly a decade can go. And especially if you look at, the time that we're in now, post pandemic, if you will, like, you know, sometimes you don't have necessarily a point of reference for time. Um, so yeah, I look back to the 90s. All right, so I'm gonna take you back, right? So 1991. 1991, I graduated from high school. Major milestone. It was something that and I'll never forget the day. Remember it like it was yesterday, June 7th, 1991. Um, it was a major thing. Looking back on it, and I've said this before in the podcast before, and it's worth repeating. I don't think I really enjoyed it as much as I probably should have because like I was so tunnel focused on what the next step was. So I really didn't appreciate, or take in the fact that, hey, you graduated from high school because like my goal and my dreams and aspirations and my vision was already to college. So I really wasn't even focused on, getting this high school diploma. I mean, it was something that was supposed to happen. And obviously it did happen, but it's like, I just kind of looked at it like, whatever. um, but still an accomplishment in and of itself. Uh, and there's something I think is to be said and something to be celebrated, really, because everybody doesn't do it. Most people do, but everybody doesn't. And some people have things that kind of trip them up along the way, circumstances, life, whatever. And but I never really stopped to be like, hey, you graduated from high school in 1991. That's something that's an accomplishment in and of itself. Um, and then so the next step for me in that trajectory would be attending college in 1991. In the fall of 1991, I went to I attended and graduated from. Well, let's just start with attended. I attended the great South Carolina State University in Orangeburg, South Carolina. As many of you know or don't know, it's a historically black college again, located in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Having graduated from high school in Florence, South Carolina, from Wilson High School. Wilson is in Florence. Florence is maybe about 90-mile drive from Orangeburg to Florence. So I was not too far away, but I wasn't too close either. So they could get to me if they needed to, but nobody was just going to pop up and pull up on me. But even attending college was something, a milestone that, that I wanted to do. And, having seen a TV show like A Different World, that really, really made me be like, I can do this. Like, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to experience. And, I've spoken before on the episode about A Different World and, what that show meant to me. And it gave me a vision. It gave me something to look at and something to see. And I wasn't, stepping on South Carolina State's campus was not something new to me. I'd been there before plenty of times. My uncle went to school there. My older cousin Mike was there at the time that me and my cousin Eric got there in the fall of '91. So I wasn't new to Orangeburg or South Carolina State University. But, that quickly and more importantly became home. And, that's a milestone that, again, you don't really think about because it's not, I know now things are a whole lot different than how it was, back then, but, applying to a college, getting accepted to a college. I mean, like, people don't really understand it, but there's a lot of stress that goes along with that. I wasn't stressed because I want to say by the time that I was a sophomore in high school, I'd made up my mind that I wasn't going to a PWI, predominantly white institution. I wasn't going. So the University of South Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, Alabama, Syracuse University, none of those schools were on my list. So if anything, I made the decision a whole lot easier for me because now I don't have to worry about them. Now I can solely focus on finding the right HBCU, historically Black college and university, finding the right HBCU for me, right? So that was something. And again, you have the milestone of graduating from high school, then you have the milestone of attending college. And, it's interesting because, like, even getting to South Carolina State University as a freshman, they bring you in this huge auditorium and, the famous words, look to your left, look to your right. Some of these people will not be around you in 4 years. And they weren't lying. Like, I mean, it's damn near impossible to think that you're going to ride this course and it not be a bumpy road, or bumpy spots in the road. And, some people get knocked off track. A lot of people got knocked off track, myself included, but I was able to maintain and stay in school, but a lot happened during that time. So, again, in 10 years, the 90s, being able to graduate from high school, being able to attend the college that you wanted to go to. And I think that's very important too, because, a lot of times kids get a chance to go to college, but some kids don't necessarily get to go to the school that they want to go to. I've mentioned it before in this podcast, and it's worth repeating. South Carolina State wasn't in my top 3. I want to say South Carolina State probably was like 4 or 5, but things happened and, it became, while it wasn't my first pick, it became the best pick as far as schools for me that I could have ever chosen. Right. So again, that's another milestone, attending college, being able to navigate through the ups and downs, playing football, developing socially or not developing socially, and everything that came with it, along with growing and becoming a young man, a responsible young man. So that's a milestone. So then in 1996, so I enrolled in the fall of 1991, graduate. Thank you, Lordy. uh, December 14th, 1996. Um, and up until that point in my life, that by far was the happiest day that I've ever experienced in my entire life, graduating from the great illustrious South Carolina State University. Um, you can't put a price tag on that feeling. Uh, I don't know what it's like to hit the lottery, but I like to think that day I hit the lottery. Because everything changed. Um, Being able to set out with goals and accomplish those goals and then ultimately cross the finish line. Um, Me and my man Mo used to always say, the best move we made in our stadium, Oliver C. Dawson Stadium, was, walking across that stage. That was more than any touchdowns, it was more than any catches, that was more than any time the band played anything. That was the best move that I made, walking across that stage. And that, has paid dividends, not just for me, but me and my family. So that's another milestone. And again, just personally, like I don't really think about it. Like it's like, oh yeah, I graduated. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. Graduating was a huge thing for me because I had my moments, bruh. I had my moments where I was like, I don't know if this is gonna make it. And I mentioned on previous episodes that I had my doubts. There were times that I wasn't even sure if I was gonna stay at South Carolina State. It is what it is. Now, it turned out to be one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life. But you don't necessarily see that when things are happening, because sometimes things happen so fast, like you don't know, right? And so again, it's a milestone, it's graduation and it's celebration. And in between, arriving on campus and graduating and playing football and learning all these things and learning so much about myself, I made lifelong friends. I made friends that, I'm still close to this day. I mean, like brothers, sisters. And ultimately I would eventually meet the love of my life and someone who I would become friends with and eventually marry. Um, and still married to this day, 4 kids later, almost 23 years of marriage at the time of this recording. So, another milestone in meeting the people who would kind of help define that era and that genre for that, not genre, that era for you. I think that's very important. I don't think we necessarily look at that because a lot of times we look at our successes and our failures just from within, but a lot of times, particularly the successes, it's that community of friends and family around us that kind of help mold us into who we're going to become. And I was no different. I was definitely molded. I mean, I am who I was at the time, but no, who I was going to become was slowly being molded by, my friends, my teammates, definitely my family, uh, definitely by, my experiences, and, very much so definitely by, the relationship that I had that would cultivate with Sharice. So yeah, it was something that was definitely that you don't really think about, but again, milestones. So in 10 years, these milestones are slowly but surely happening. And so you graduate, right? So it's like, oh wow, I graduated. Um and then post graduation, you got to figure things out, right? I have to figure out, like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? Where am I going to be? What do I want to do for the rest of my life? I have this marketing degree. Where am I trying to let this take me? And where am I taking myself? And so, I had to ask myself those tough questions. And so, ultimately, July of 1997, July 24th, 1997, I decided to move from, because I graduated in 96, right? December, let's go back. I graduated December 14th, 1996. So I stayed in Orangeburg, where South Carolina State is located. Stayed there for another, 7 months. And I wasn't really sure. I was kind of figuring I was contemplating going to grad school. Then I, famously talked to my boy Jay Fresh, and I was like, man, I want to move to Atlanta. He was like, man, me too. Like, yeah, right, whatever. I was like, yeah, I'm serious. He had just graduated from Coastal Carolina, and he was back home in Florence. And we decided to move to Atlanta together. So July 24th, 1997, I moved to Atlanta. Biggest decision up until that point that I'd ever made. And I mentioned on previous episodes, having been here now going on, at the time of this recording, almost 26 years. I wouldn't have thought that I'd be here this long. But it's a place that I had come before and fell in love with the city, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the vibe, everything about it. But if you'd have told me damn near 26 years ago that I was going to still be here, I'd tell you it's crazy, because I didn't. When you're going through milestones and stepping stones like that, you don't really think, at least I didn't. I don't think you think long term. You're 23, 24 years old. You're not thinking long term like that. Like, you don't think, hey, I'm going to settle down and, plant my roots here and, get married and raise a family. No, you don't think like that. But I mean, like, again, this is the 90s. So much stuff is happening, and you're growing and you're figuring things out, and you're still hitting these milestones. And so moving to Atlanta was huge. Like, and I tell people all the time, and it's funny when I think about it. Like, I didn't know anybody here. Nobody. Just me and Fresh. That was it. We didn't know nobody. We didn't know where to go. We spent a lot of time in the car riding around because we didn't know. And I mean, like, I have a very good sense of direction. So my thing is, like, you can put me in any city, I'll find my way around. And the reason why I know that is because the way most cities are set up is, at some point, no matter which direction you're going in, you're going to hit either a major thoroughfare or a major uh, uh, highway or interstate, or a major street, and then that can be like your landmark. So even without the advent of GPS or anything like that, we got around and found our way around. And so I knew, if I was downtown, at some point I'd run into an interstate, and then I could find my way back home. But yeah, I mean, being able to do that and be young in a new city with a pocket full of money and no responsibilities, because I mean, I didn't have any kids at the time. That was cool. Also quite dangerous. But the difference is that you're still taking steps. So I guess what I'm saying is, these are steps of success, but I'm not even looking at it like that. I'm just looking at, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I think part of it is, my mindset was like, just the old football mentality of, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, and so as you're having success play to play, you're not necessarily worried about what you did on the previous play. You're just on to the next play. So you go catch a pass, first down. You're not celebrating that play. You're trying to figure out what the next play is, if I can equate it to a football game. And so that's really how I kind of matriculated through the 90s. Not necessarily stopping to say, hey, man, you're doing all right for yourself. And don't get me wrong, I think there were times where people would say, hey, man, I'm proud of you, so forth and so on. But I never really, like, stopped to say, like, okay, I'm doing this. Like, this is something that's major that's happening in my life, and these are major stepping stones. I know my parents, my family informed me of it, but it's like, you're so, I don't want to make it sound like I was so focused, like I'd never stopped to smell the roses. But I think over a period of time, as I got older, I learned to do that. But I think when you're that age, And at that point in time in my life, I don't know that I could have ever stopped to smell the roses. And I think one of the things I want everybody to get from this particular episode is that whether it's a 5-year stretch or 10-year stretch, celebrate your accomplishments. More importantly, allow others to celebrate your accomplishments, because more of us, probably more than we think, we do a lot of dope stuff every day or every other day or every year. And yeah, most people will take the time to celebrate their birthdays, but celebrate your success. I think that's important because we don't have a clock. We know that there is a clock, but we don't have a clock. And if you don't have a clock, like, you don't know when that clock will get punched. And I'm not trying to speak morbid or anything like that. I mean, I want all of us to be around forever. The reality is that we won't be, right? So the time that you're here, celebrate those successes. Because you know how it is. Most of us will fall back and look back, oh man, I should have taken that job with IBM. We look at the failures, and that's understandable. I mean, like, if you drop a pass, you're going to focus on dropping a pass. You're not thinking about catching a touchdown pass. You're thinking probably, like, how or why did I drop that ball that was easily catchable? That being said, like, celebrate the successes and the milestones. So it's 97. I'm here in Atlanta, and I'm like, wow, okay, I've done something. I've done some things. And I remember even telling some people that I knew from around the way, and I was like, I'm gonna move to Atlanta. I was like, oh man, you'll move to the big city of Atlanta? I'm like, it's a city. Like, it ain't no, I mean, I've never been caught up in all of that. I mean, like, is it fast paced? Yeah, it was fast, especially for somebody coming from Florence. Very fast paced. But, that stuff really didn't even come into play until I got to become a parent. So that's when, like, okay, where do I live? That type of stuff. So again, another milestone, moving. 1999, everything flips. Everything flips. Everything flips. August 9th, 1999, I become a father for the first time. Man, listen. That time will always be special to me because, like, and it's wild because it's like, you had a life before you had kids. That you outside, you running around, you had something going on before you had kids, but life really changed and everything. That light switch went off on that day. We had Dion. We weren't married, but we would subsequently get married. But yeah, that was a game changer. Like, everything, nothing else was important. Everything was solely focused on him and doing whatever it took to provide for him and wherever we were going to be as a family. And so, again, that was a game changer, man. It was like a major milestone. And I was like, of my closest friends, like, I was the first one to, graduate. I wasn't the first one to graduate, but I was the first one post-graduation to have a kid. And so that was bugged out too, because my boys was like, oh man, you a daddy, like, and it was so funny. So I beat them to fatherhood to some degree. But yeah, it was a game changer. And it was the milestone, I think, in the 90s that changed everything for me, because the things that I thought mattered didn't really matter. The things that I didn't think mattered really mattered. If that makes sense. And so 1999, I become a father. So in the 10-year span, in 10 years, I went from graduating from Wilson, attending South Carolina State University, graduating from South Carolina State University, moving to Atlanta. And then the fifth one was becoming a father. Those are major milestones to occur in any man's life. Graduating high school, going to college, graduating from college, moving, and becoming a parent. And then if I want to add a little bit more onto the 10 years, September 23rd, 2000, I get married. Jackpot. I've, in essence, completed almost the entire spectrum of young adulthood, to some. And so I went from, in a short span, in a 10-year span, I went from a high school senior to a married father with a young child and a college graduate in a new city. That's a lot. And it's something that I never really thought to kind of sit back and be like, you know what, you did some shit. Shout out to Babi and Maya from the We Did That Shit podcast. I did some shit. And it's definitely something I think to be proud of, because, like, you know, again, there's always obstacles and things that can get in your way. And you have moments of doubt and moments of trepidation and moments of, I don't know if it's going to work, you know. And it makes a total difference too when how you navigate when it's just you, as opposed to navigating when you have a wife and a kid. Totally different. Yeah, if I was single, man, I'd run into a wall. It don't matter. Not literally, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I mean, like, you throw caution to the wind, you don't care, because there's a certain level of invincibility that comes with being young and dumb. And so maybe you probably did some things that weren't probably the smartest things to do as a young man. You know, but you know, shit happens. But no, as a married man, as father of a young infant, no, you dumb shit, some shit you just ain't gonna do, or at least you shouldn't be doing. But even going through that and being able to see those milestones through, I think meant something, and it still does mean something to me. So, you know, I came to this episode. I saw this picture, the picture that is being used for the cover art. Is a picture that we took. I want to say I was a junior in college, right before our championship year at South Carolina State University, when we won the Black College National Championship in 1994. That happened too. Shout out to Grambling. But yeah, I mean, like, I think over time you just learn to appreciate these things, and these milestones that happen literally helped me become who I became. And it's funny because, like, I remember telling one of my sons, I think I was telling Cameron this a couple of months ago. I was like, yeah, you looking at the finished product. Like, trust and believe. Like, I was once your age, and it wasn't that long ago where I was your age. Yeah, it was 30 years ago, but still, I know what it felt like. I know what it looked like. And the thing I tried to impress upon him in that conversation was, like, in that span of time, so much happened. And, like, you could literally blink your eye and 30 years would go by, you know. But I wanted him to see, like, in a 10-year span, I went from goofy high school kid. Well, I don't say goofy, cool and goofy high school kid to, you know, college graduate, to a father, to being a married man in 2000. It's a lot. But it's also an accomplishment, and those milestones I think are worth celebrating. And like I said, I saw the picture and I just made me think, like, you know what, you did some things, and it's okay to celebrate them. And more importantly, you should celebrate yourself, because if you don't celebrate yourself, nobody else will. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. Be sure to subscribe. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, we drop bonus episodes on Sundays. If you feel like it, hit us up on Cash App. Contribute to the show financially. $TWELVEKYLE. Again, that's going to do it for me. I'm your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.